Welcome back to Autism Live. We're very excited because the first time here on the show, we have the amazing Lee Grossman. He is joining us via Skype. And Lee, I'm so excited to have you on the show because we have, it's hard to even pinpoint how to introduce you because you've done so many things in this community. And we're going to try to get to as many of them as we can in the time that we've got here. But you have been a leader in the autism community for a very long time. And have played many different roles. So I want to start by welcoming you and say, how did this start? How did the collaboration between Lee Grossman and autism, how did this all come to be?
Well, Shannon, I first want to say thank you for having me on your program. I find your program to be inspirational and informative, and you're providing a wonderful service to the autism community. Thank you so much. How did I get started in autism? The way most parents do, where I'm a parent of a child with autism. He's now 30 years old. I can't believe it. A wonderful, wonderful child. Love him dearly, and that's how I got started. And that's
that makes you officially one of the pioneers. That we have certain parents that we look up to and we say, they're the pioneers. They're the ones that forged the way for the rest of us. Because 30 years ago, when your child was diagnosed, there was pretty much nothing. Am I correct?
Yeah, well, there was nothing. There was very little. And particularly where I lived at the time, which was in Hawaii, there was virtually nothing. I will take some umbrage with you on this pioneer label that you've put on me, because I feel as though what I was able to accomplish was because I was able to be carried on the shoulders of true pioneers that were in the field, which I in my journey was very fortunate to become friends with, to learn from, and to work side by side with them. And it was with a great deal of gratitude that I have for them and for what they were able to accomplish. People including like Bernie Rimland, Eric Shopler, Ruth Sullivan. These are true pioneers and heroes of the autism community that have done so much for all of us, that have bettered the lives of everybody on the planet today with autism. When I started with my journey, I really didn't know where to go. It took such a long time for my child to be even diagnosed. We knew something was wrong, and I went with my two boys on a summer vacation and to spend some time with my sister on the East Coast, and she happens to be a psychologist. And when I returned back to Hawaii, there was a letter. These are back in the days where we still wrote letters. There was a letter waiting for me from her that was beautifully written, and basically threatening me that if I didn't do something for my son, my second son, she was going to step in and take him away from me. Because at that time, he was such a lovely child, so personable, so friendly, that we were hearing from doctors when I'd say, do you think anything's wrong with him? And they go, oh, no, he's a lovely child. He'll grow out of this. And that really is what spurred me to go and start to investigate further what perhaps is going on with him.
Well, I got to stop you for a second, though, because people ask all the time, what do you do when you see a parent who's in denial? And for your sister to say, you need to do something, or I'm going to do something, and potentially even take your child away, I hear that it spurred you into action, but are you still speaking? And was that something that you now look at and go, thank goodness she did that, or do you wish she'd taken a different tact?
I have her letter in my desk drawer here. I've saved that letter. It was what I needed to hear. And I've been very blunt in the times that I've talked to parents that I believe are in denial. They have to hear the story. They have to get started. They have to move forward. In the positions that I've held over the years into autism, I've been incredibly fortunate to talk with thousands, literally thousands of clinicians and parents and individuals with autism. And what I found is that sometimes you just have to be direct, and not only being direct, but to hold their hand to guide them, because that's what happened to me. I went and started this journey meeting with all the best of the best doctors, as they were described to me, in Hawaii to try to get some sort of diagnosis for my son. And it was a very distressing period where I would walk into one doctor's office and they'd say, "Oh, he's fine. He'll grow out of it. Einstein didn't talk till he was 4 years old." And then I remember very vividly on December 31st of 1990, getting the results on my son from the person that was described as the best child psychologist in the state, telling me to my face that I should institutionalize him and throw away the keys and get on with my life.
Wow.
I literally walked up to his desk, took the file, and asked him, "Are you reading? Are you sure you have the right file?" It was a very distressing time, as you can imagine, as we went through this. Fortunately, I had this sister who said, "You might want to look into this thing that I heard in my readings called PDD. I don't really know what it's about, but it's kind of related to autism." And I ended up going to the library, which is what you did in the early 90s. You couldn't get on the internet and look these things up. And I took out of the Hawaii State Library as many books as I could that had the subject of autism in it, which was 4 books. And I remember reading those and seeing for the first time in very clear detail what my son had, and that was autism. It was many, many months later, again, kind of forcing myself in to see Dr. Eric Schoppler in North Carolina at Division Teach at the University of North Carolina, and taking my son there because nobody would diagnose my son with autism. And I kept talking to the doctors in Hawaii about this. Do you think it's autism? "Oh, no. He's too nice. He's too friendly." They really didn't associate. Their typical description was that he had to have very negative behavioral characteristics, which he really didn't display. And it wasn't until that time that I went to University of North Carolina, to Chapel Hill, and met with Dr. Eric Schoppler. In the first 30 seconds that he met with Vance, he said, "He's autistic." And that was the first time from a professional that I heard that diagnosis for him. And it was a very moving experience for me. And Eric and I became very dear friends. And through that experience, I was able to mimic what Division Teach was doing and convince the Department of Education in Hawaii to begin to develop 2 Division Teach type classrooms, which benefited many of the students in Hawaii. If anybody was a pioneer, he referred to me as a pioneer, it was my son. My son was one of the first kids in Hawaii that got exposed to Division Teach, that got exposed to ABA, auditory integrated training, speech therapy, occupational therapy, really the whole gamut of services that really didn't exist prior to Vance's diagnosis. And he was the pioneer for many of these services that were brought into the state and have remained since.
But I just want to say, credit where credit is due, you were an integral part about making that happen. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been. And so when I say pioneer, I mean it in the nicest, most respectful term, that there are so many of us who are following and have been following in your snowshoes. And because you started a path that we then follow. And I'm wondering, Lee, first there's the devastation of your child is diagnosed, but at what point did you really get it that not only were you going to have to deal with that, but you were going to have to be a part of creating something that didn't exist? Because there are parents right now who get the diagnosis, and even now with everything that there is, they are at sea. And it's so interesting to me to watch that progression for when a parent suddenly goes, "Oh, I'm going to have to help be a part of the change that comes next." When did that happen for you? When did you get it that, "Oh, I'm not just going to be able to let this be, I'm going to have to grow something"?
Well, that's an excellent question, because I remember explicitly how that happened. I as I was going through again this journey and finally had this diagnosis of autism, I had heard, I think I saw a flyer on a bulletin board at one of the local grocery stores that said there's an Autism Society of Hawaii, and that they had this meeting at a church that was actually fairly close to my house. And I walked in there to one of the meetings, and the first meeting that I attended, and I really have to say that I had a chip on my shoulder. I was a real jerk. I thought I knew everything. I thought that there wasn't anything that these people could help me with or tell me about. And I had already heard it. I'd been through the ups and very, very low downs on this journey, and felt that they couldn't help me or say anything. I really did come in there with a bad attitude. And within 5 minutes, that all changed. These people reached out their arms, they reached out their hearts, they took me under their shoulders. And when I say about the pioneering and the work that we did in Hawaii, it was because of these people and working with them and following their leads, and all of us working together, that we were able to accomplish what we were able to do. And understanding and realizing at that point that there was a community here that we could work with, that we could work together to create what was needed, not only for my son and for my family, but for all of us. And it was at that point that I knew and decided that I had to be a strong advocate for my son, and committed to do so. It was kind of that point of inflection where I felt like, oh, woe is me, oh, I'm so terrible and this is so hard, that I said, wow, I can finally do something, and I can make things happen, and I can change them. And that was a very, very important part of my process. And I've seen that as the turning point for many families, for many parents, when they make that decision instead of carrying a burden, to be proactive and to be assertive and to be somewhat aggressive in terms of getting the services that are so necessary for their child.
Yeah, I totally agree. It is so much easier to be in action than it is to be in grief and all the other things that can come along with this. But Lee, how did you get from there, from saying, okay, I'm gonna make a difference and I'm here at this meeting, to becoming the president of the largest grassroots parent organization in the history of autism, the Autism Society of America? How did you get there?
Well, within about 6 months, this is part of a whole progression. Within about 6 months of walking in that door of the Autism Society of Hawaii, I became the president of the chapter. And it was at a very, very important inflection point in the history of Hawaii. Hawaii was rated as having the worst special ed system in the country. And we formed a coalition with many of the other organizations in the state of Hawaii, and filed a class action lawsuit against the state in federal court. It turned out that was the largest, I think even today, the largest class action suit of its kind ever filed. And it was the points of it were primarily that the state was not in compliance with Section 504 and IDEA. After many months of negotiation and court and trial dates, the state was forced to enter into a consent decree where they admitted, and the federal judge said that there was criminal neglect that the state had done in servicing special ed students in the state of Hawaii. And the Autism Society of Hawaii was one of the two organizational plaintiffs in the case. And by virtue of the fact that I was the president at the time, that kind of put me on the stage to be very forefront on that. And through that experience, I guess I developed somewhat of a national reputation. And was asked to speak at many national conferences. Our chapter, and this is the work of some very great people that was in our chapter, also organized some very innovative, state-of-the-art autism conferences. And maybe it's because we were in Hawaii, but we were able to attract the leaders in the field to come to Hawaii on a fairly regular basis to present to the community and the Department of Education and many other people there. Bernie Rimland and I became very dear friends, and Bernie used to love to come to Hawaii to talk. So that was always an easy ask to have him. And it was really through these experiences that I got to be known. I went to my first Autism Society of America National Conference in 1992. Very serendipitously started talking to some people. As I was registering, they invited me to dinner. I was there by myself. It was actually in Toronto, Canada. And the dinner that they invited me to was the dinner for the board of directors of the Autism Society of America. So without even knowing, I was there talking to them and made some very, very good, close friendships. And within a year, I was on some committees for ASA. And then in 1995, I was elected to the board of ASA and served in that capacity until I became the chair of the board in 2001. And that's kind of how I rose, I guess, through the ranks, so to speak.
Well, and I think you're very modest. I think that they looked at you and clearly you are a mover and a shaker. Clearly you are somebody who gets it done, and you're so eloquent and so well spoken, and this was personal for you. And so you get it when it's personal to other people. But I think we all recognize a leader when we see one, and I think they certainly saw that in you very quickly. And so, you know, there have been so many ways that you've been able to impact the autism community. And we could talk for 4 hours just about your time at Autism Society of America. But if there was one thing that you wanted to point to while you were there that you feel good in your bones about, what do you think is something that you feel good about that happened while you were there?
Well, there were so many. There are many. Some of the things I'm very proud of is the fact that the Autism Society came out very strongly and actually pushed forward in 2006 a project that identified the rise in autism squarely related to environmental factors, and we had an initiative regarding environmental factors as a major contributor to autism. I think that changed the paradigm in the way that we talk about autism, because at that time it was kind of taboo to even go in that direction. But within a year or so, the federal government was saying that environmental factors play a role in the rise of autism. And even about 2 months ago, there was a recent article, a 120-page paper that was published by the EPA and the National Institutes of Environmental Health Services on environmental factors related to all chronic health conditions. And in it, it said that about 60 to 70% of the factors related to somebody getting autism are environmentally related. So I'm very, very proud of that. One of the other things that I was very proud of was the fact that we identified the primary crisis in autism is adult services, or the lack thereof of adult services, and realizing, understanding, and identifying that these children grow up and they're going to spend the majority of their lives as adults, and there's very, very little services or attention that's paid towards that. And adult services, they inherit all the failures of the previous systems that these kids have gone through. So I was very proud that we were able to bring that to the forefront. I think that one of the thing that I'm most proud of when I was at the Autism Society was that we would not allow a committee, a panel, a board, a project, anything to be formed unless there was a person with autism that was there as a peer, as an advisor, at the same level as everybody else, to be involved in that project. We wanted to not only talk the talk, we wanted to walk the walk, and that was really based maybe on my own prejudice, that I have learned more about autism from people with autism, and felt that by not having their voice there and not having them in these leadership positions and not hearing from them and having them help us direct and guide us through this was a missed opportunity, a massive scale. So we made that a policy, and and I've held, and at the time I held to it because it was very, very important. And the organization grew and benefited significantly by having individuals with autism in leadership positions, playing in a very, very important role in every part of our activities.